Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Happy Friday. We're back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Joining me today is a good friend of mine, former colleague, Gary Dmitriev. How are you today, Gary?
Hey, Namdi, good to be on. I'm good. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Today, we're going to talk about the power of automation, how RPA transforms financial services. Really looking forward to this conversation. It's been a while since I've worked with RPA, so I want to dive into it. Before we get into it, let me just do some housekeeping. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. We also have a stream going from Instagram to my Instagram people. If you want to join the conversation with your comments, join one of those Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, or go to the techbehindfintech.com and we can add you to the show. For everyone else, feel free to comment. We'll add you to the show. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest and then we will jump into today's topic. Gary Dmitriev is the founder and chief technology advisor at CrestPoint Strategic Advisors, LLC, serving the technology needs of alternative investment firms. Gary has spent 17 years in the financial services industry and has served as co-CTO and CTO at several top asset managers, leading back office automation initiatives, bespoke platforms development, and enterprise data analytics strategies. Gary, once again, welcome to the show. So,
Thank you.
RPA, a lot of people don't even know, have never heard of RPA. Let's give an overview of what RPA is, and then let's jump into it and why it's changing the financial services back office and automating tons of things.
Sounds good. Yeah. So RPA stands for Robotics Process Automation. Sounds super techy, but basically all it is it's a discipline of technology and software that allows you to automate tasks that would otherwise be more manual, right? And not easily automatable through traditional application development strategies. So an example would be, things like processes that mimic what a person would do on their PC, right? This is something that, yes, you can build an application around, you could buy a vendor product around, you could, hit APIs, but truly mimicking a human-driven process, clicking on applications, data entry, working with Excel spreadsheets, doing lookups, saving a file, attaching it, sending it somewhere, maybe hitting a system with an API. So these are processes that truly mimic an individual, and they could run on a PC like a human being would perform these tasks, or they could run on a server overnight. They can have a person in the loop and answering questions or filling in responses, or they could have no one in the loop and it can send a summary in the morning about what it did overnight. So there's no magic to it, but it's a really cool set of technologies and increasingly vendor products out there that can help you accomplish some pretty incredible things.
And that's like one of the things, right? Everyone always talks about automation. You have, AI processes, right? And everybody's big on automation. And RPA has been around for, I don't know, I saw it taking shape. It's probably been around before this, but I've seen it taking shape big within the last decade. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
That's what it looks like. That's where the big players started popping up. But it's funny, if you remember back in, I don't know, early 2000s, maybe at this point, the concept of like macros and recording your actions and clicks, that to me, that's like the genesis. That's like the very early RPA sort of just dipping their toes into that, right? Just taking a human process that's very mundane and repetitive and on your PC and just repeating it and automating it and running it like a robot, basically, to accomplish what you would accomplish, on your desktop. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, probably 10, 15 years or so, but they were sort of the foundations of it, the seeds of that technology were laid much earlier.
And we can understand that, right? Like
Yeah,
forever within financial services, there's always been a need to, how do we automate this? How do we make things faster? How can
exactly.
we, streamline our processes? So, this coming to light, right, just adds to that. Kind of furthering, like going along that path. Like right now, I know in some organizations it's mission critical to leverage RPA, especially once they start expanding their portfolio. Why do you think that criticality is so critical right now?
So RPA technology, what a couple of things that it could do for a business is uh, it what it does is it lets individuals focus on higher value strategic knowledge work and move away from the day to day that everyone finds themselves doing. Like I was saying earlier, just responding to certain emails, filing things away, things that you don't necessarily have an application for, right? You're not going to go in as a technologist and automate, digitize absolutely every part of a back office operation. um, there are always going to be forms and paperwork that have to be filed. They're going to have to collect digital signatures. You're going to have ask someone a question to respond to a particular coding that has to go into a particular system in order for you to produce a particular report. Things that you don't necessarily have systems or processes in place for. What RPA can do as a firm is scaling is get in the middle of that and help leverage technology to take away some of these repetitive processes. And that way, you're not linearly adding headcount as you're onboarding new funds, as the business is diversifying its investment strategy, as the business is growing. You can maintain headcount, and in some cases, we've actually seen you can actually improve job satisfaction and reduce turnover. So not only are you avoiding hiring certain roles that would just be there to backfill some of the manual processes that are happening, but you retain your highest value employees who are really not there to point and click and file Excel spreadsheets away and file paperwork. They're there to analyze investments. They're there to strategize. They're there to evaluate and model. So you take them once you take those repetitive processes away, they focus on that higher value work, and that boosts their career, boosts their job satisfaction, and you're retaining a better workforce, and you're avoiding this linear headcount. So I think it allows these funds to grow in a very efficient and scalable way, which is ultimately that is the mission of technologists, right? As technologists, that's our mission, is to enable an enterprise to grow and scale without in tandem growing their headcount just to keep up with the volume of work that's coming. Technology is supposed to provide some leverage there.
Let's take a step back, right? Because we use um terms like back office and so forth fluidly because we're in the industry. For those that don't know, and if you're looking at a financial services firm, when you say back office, what do you mean by that?
So operations. So in the financial services industry, front office is typically referred to being close to the revenue generating side. So fundraising, going out to investors, originating deals, submitting deal ideas, and closing and executing on deals. Back office is the operations center that really makes sure that the business is running, that handles cash activity, make sure there's money in bank accounts, make sure we are following the law and filing the appropriate regulatory paperwork, and make sure that we're booking and tracking and accounting for our financial activity, and then allowing the front office to report those results, not only to investors but to executive leadership in the front office, and make sure that we're actually generating the kind of returns that we promise we're going to generate. So the back office is where a lot of automation opportunities tend to present themselves first. Front office tends to be more sort of bespoke and focused on just individual skill sets and evaluating an investment and discussing, and very kind of human to human type of interactions for the most part. There are some exceptions there, of course, with analysis and just the AI boom that's coming. But on the back office is where you got a lot of sort of operational repetitive processes that are pretty ripe for automation.
Thanks for that. We have an actual LinkedIn user. And let's listen, guys. We always love your comments, questions. If you want to add in, feel free to do it. I always say that every time I talk, and I always say this is a conversation, not a presentation. So love the interaction. LinkedIn user don't know your name, but what asking, do you think some businesses miss the capability RPA and instead jump to AI instead?
Uh, I wouldn't say that they're competitive. So first of all, AI is actually becoming a big enabler of RPA. So AI and ML and Gen AI is being, if you look at the big players, Blue Prism, UiPath out there, even Microsoft especially, and with their Power Platform, they are increasingly adding AI and ML capabilities into their offering. So, for example, a good example of something my team built in the past is invoice reconciliation, right? So you get an invoice as an unstructured document from a vendor. You want to look at your bank transactions. You want to take that invoice, tick and tie, and say, yes, we are expecting this invoice for this amount for this activity, and we can see the money that left the door, went out the door from our bank account, and then maybe we even want to reconcile it and tie it to something on a spreadsheet that was sent to us by the vendor, explaining the details of what the work was done and does it add up to the invoiced amount. Just high level example. AI plays a big role in processes like that because you're dealing with unstructured data. You're dealing with a PDF that's sent over that may look different from one vendor to the next. So what Gen AI is increasingly able to do is to take a document, process it, pull out the amount, pull out some identifier, pull out some other invoice information, and now feed it to an RPA platform, and then use more traditional technologies to maybe hit a database or pull from an Excel sheet or something like that and reconcile it. So I wouldn't say they're competitive. I think that it's a misunderstanding to say, well, I'm going to choose one or the other. I think that they can play nicely together. I think that they also serve two very different use cases. Gen AI is more of a that's a toolkit for analysts and just making sense of large volumes of data and distilling data and even generating content. RPA is not necessarily going to do that. RPA is going to automate repetitive processes that don't require a lot of decision making. But what I have been reading lately is that a lot of these tools, as they're incorporating AI, not just to process unstructured documents, they're also leveraging Gen AI now increasingly to make complex decisions that traditionally you would have had to route to a person. So an RPA automation would hit some wall or some unexpected result. It would go to Namdi and say, "Hey, we don't know what to make of this. This didn't match our expectation." Gen AI can now be integrated with that automation and actually make a decision based on the probability of it being successful and looking at past results and maybe just summarizing it for Namdi and saying, this is the decision that was made. Here's why. We move down to the next task.
Great question. Love the answer. One of the things from my experience of RPA, I was using it prior to the big AI, ML, LLM boom. But in my past experience with it, right, you're spot on. Like leveraging it as a companion, it's not a competitor. Now I can extract certain data elements and then plug it back into the RPA so that can automate whatever process that we're trying to solve. So totally love that answer, and I could totally see it from past experience in working with RPA.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, I think it's just another tool in the tool belt, and I don't think you should weigh one versus the other. I think you should look at them as compensating each other, actually.
So, when we talk about it and looking at it, we look at it from the perspective of larger financial firms, where there's a ton of back office overhead or operational overhead, and people are doing a lot of manual tasking. We're dealing with it in this fintech world that we're in. Where I guess where can you see certain use cases in the fintech world?
In fintech, so I think that the volume of processes that are ripe for automation, you're going to see more in large enterprises. For example, an investment bank or Bank of America type of organization, Goldman Sachs type of organization, where you do tend to hire volumes of individuals performing repetitive tasks. Right, it happens. There's data entry. There's just analysis that has to be done. There's paperwork. There are tons of legal processes. There are tons of administrative processes that have to be done. So what I've seen and what I've discussed with some of the big players in the marketplace is that those places are where like significant ROI can be generated because you can avoid very significant headcount increases as the business grows. Fintech, depending on the nature of the company, depending on what they're doing, where I can see ROI would be interactions with customers, and especially with like the AI ML revolution. I can see companies taking advantage of a natural language conversation with a customer support ticket, or some other kind of, maybe a request for a demo, or request for more info or something like that, or even setting up an initial call with a potential customer prospect. What RPA can do, it can play very nicely with AI, is that RPA can actually be the one that takes action. So you can have something that sparks some kind of activity. There's a conversation. And actually, an interesting example of something we've done in the past is a help desk automation process. So you have an end user, which could be a customer, right, in the world of fintech, that would reach out and say, through a chat, through an email, through some other method, even a phone call, and say, "Hey, I locked my account out," or "Oh, I'd like to be added to this particular application as a reader," or "I want to be added to this particular email distribution group." Uh, the kind of initial point of contact could be an app, could be a web application, a data entry form, could be ML, AI, but RPA can then actually take action, and it can go and add the person physically to an Active Directory group, or it can physically add them and permission them to an application, or it can physically reset their account password, or in the fintech world, it can actually create an account for them. It could create an entry in a CRM. It could maybe put together a welcome packet for them and customize it and send it to them. And these are things that sure you might be able to accomplish through more traditional application development paradigms, but there are some situations where you're hitting multiple systems. Those systems may not be ripe for automation, and something like RPA can actually compensate for that. And if you find yourself as a fintech hiring a person to just manage that administrative onboarding or point of contact with a customer, or a prospect, RPA can actually step in the middle of that and help you scale.
No, it's interesting with your previous example of a use case where you're reconciling the invoice with the account, right? I
Yeah.
automatically, what my background security, so I think about security all the time. I thought about like a business email compromise where they get into your system and all of a sudden they start to become the man in the middle and generating fake invoices to your executives, and then all of a sudden someone's paying a nefarious threat actor a large sum of money that's really met. It's a legitimate cost, but it's
Right.
not for them. And the ability, as you were talking about that example, I was just thinking about the reconciliation and catching that error on the back end where it may be missed by an individual because they're looking at depending on the size of the organization, hundreds to thousands of invoices going out.
Yeah. No, exactly. It can also help in the cybersecurity front to catch anomalies, right? That's another thing you can do. So you bring up the obviously the reconciliation example, but it can help look at, and I've seen, for example, so we could take an example of like marketing material, right? And I've seen an investor relations team use it to tick and tie marketing material that tends to be very hands-on, right? There tends to be not a lot of trust, honestly, in technology sometimes in that space when you're dealing with investors and you're saying, well, instead of hitting a button and sending custom investor letters, or quarterly summaries, or marketing material about the fund, or just a summary of your returns and what's been going on in the last quarter, in PDF form, or in just some kind of final presentation form. What a lot of these teams typically do is this painstaking process to collect Excel spreadsheet formatted reports, or even Power BI reports from the technology team, and start to tie manually. And they usually have a junior analyst on the team, or even an intern, and go and start to say, okay, we're going to look at what we're about to send to 100 clients. We're going to look at the table that has the returns by industry, or by deal, or by fund, and we're going to now sit there and tie against these Excel spreadsheets that were sent to us as a final cut for a particular period. Um, that's something that I've seen automated in the past, and that's something that you can use to have an RPA go in and actually pull up an Excel spreadsheet. Again, it's nothing fancy. It's not an API or a database integration. It's pulling up a spreadsheet just like an analyst would do, and it's pulling up a PDF or a PowerPoint, and it's literally comparing them, and it can be doing some summations and making sure that logically everything makes sense, and blessing it. Maybe send it for another round of just eyeballing for a human being before it goes on to an investor, or even automatically sending it onto the investor list. So you could translate that to sort of fraud detection, right? And I could see it ticking and tying, running some numbers, running some ratios, and just making sure that what you're expecting in an invoice or a summary or a report is tying back to some reliable golden source, to ensure there was no kind of man in the middle and no compromise there. So there are a lot of applications to it. I think the key is that it's RPA allows you to do this, build processes like this in a way that doesn't require a huge investment in designing and building custom applications for a very siloed sort of specific process, like you would traditionally. It lets you use a tool that you're already using for other automations and just quickly put together a new process without a new deployment. RPA, also a lot of these traditional products are designed for low code, non-engineering developers. So that's another very interesting aspect to it.
And you know what? I love the point that because you echoed this point a couple of times within the conversation in terms of, traditionally, you've been in the industry for like in the bio
Yeah.
said 17 years.
Yeah,
And
17, 18 years.
traditionally you've seen in these back office situations where the business will come to applicate the technology team and say, okay, listen, here's what we're trying to do and automate it. And then, obviously if you're experienced back then, you would see projects around this type of automation. Okay, we're going to build this system. We're going to access these APIs to make their lives easier. Now, leveraging RPA, right? You're taking this vendor tool, you're looking at disparate systems, right? What a human would do, and then you're now automating this process. So it's less development overhead. And I know from past experience, right? The one of the people that became an expert in it wasn't necessarily in technology, but one of the colleagues I worked with, right? I mean, we're like when I say to technology, we're not a developer per se, but they had a massive understanding of this tool, was able to automate like tons of processes with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And the interesting thing I've seen is that you can have business analysts who, or even accountants, right, who on the business side are not traditionally software engineers. They're not trained as traditional software engineers, but they're subject matter experts in their field. They're subject matter experts in the process that they're trying to automate, and they are empowered with tools like UiPath and others that are out there to pull it up and actually build sort of a visual workflow style process, test it out on their PC, iterate through it, show it to a couple people, tweak it, and then actually work with the technology group to deploy it on an enterprise level. So that's a big differentiator, I'd say, with RPA, is that it is really set up to be an everyman's tool. You can like anything else, you can make it super complicated and tech heavy and hitting various systems and hitting a database and hitting other applications on the cloud. But you can also have it be relatively simple, and you could go through and have it pull up a bunch of applications, do some data entry, pull up a spreadsheet, copy paste some material, save it, send it to someone, and that could be your process. And you don't need a software engineer to build something like that.
And interesting, I mean, you're talking about the benefits and stuff like that. From implementing it over and over again in these different dynamics, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen?
So the challenges with RPA in general are going to be, not using it or knowing what to say no to and knowing what to automate. Not everything is going to be a great candidate to automate. Some things just won't have the return on investment for it. Some things, there could be a knee-jerk reaction, especially from non-technologists, to throw everything at it and say, hey, I need, I don't know, I need something that might be better served as a feature or an add-on to an application that we already own. You do need a technology group to go in and kind of to manage that and to sort of be a voice in the room and say, well, this is not the best way to solve that problem. Sure, you could create some throwaway lightweight process on someone's desktop, and that's fine. It can just be something that helps them get through their day. But when you're talking about enterprise deployments and larger scale automation implementations, what's important is to set up some kind of committee or a center of excellence or a steerco or something that has representation from the technology team and representation from the business groups that are hoping to take advantage of this technology. You need buy-in from the top. You need executive leadership to step in and say, this is something that we want to look into, we want to prioritize. We need people to allocate some time to it because it will take time out of everyone's day. Just like any technology initiative, someone has to step away from their day job, which could be difficult because they're trying to automate something that is already time consuming. And now you're asking them to say, well, carve out an hour every day to meet with this committee so you can scope out exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish. And they can steer you in the right direction. So I would say that you do need buy-in from executive leadership. You do need some kind of committee to steer the projects and make sure that you're actually taking advantage of them. Because designing and building automations and putting them out there in the wild and not having individuals really be accountable for using them is something that could probably fall apart pretty easily when their day job, when reality hits, right? And they have fire drills and they have, quarterly close and they have to focus on their day job. So it is important to have buy-in. It's important to have champions in every group too. You're not going to have, you approach a fund accounting team. Not everyone's going to jump on the ship and say, yeah, I'm going to take time out of my day and try to build some automations to make life easier. Um, some people won't be excited about it. Some people are not naturally technologically inclined, but you will always find that one champion. It's important to identify them and say, well, okay, this is the person that now is going to represent the group. They're going to take this initiative forward, and they're going to be accountable for the group actually leveraging the automation and getting something out of it. And then this committee, this organization, this center of excellence would be accountable for ensuring that there's support, maintenance, and evolution of the reporting paradigm across the organization.
Cool. Let's jump into that. I love like center of excellence in general. Anytime we're doing a massive shift in, whether it was previously trying to migrate from prem to cloud, whether we're introducing some sort of DevOps or change management aspect to it. I love the idea of a center of excellence that's gonna you get, or even if we simply even talking about like business continuity and disaster recovery, right? It's just important, as you mentioned, getting people from the different sides of the organization to
Yeah.
all input. How does that criteria work now in terms of, there are 20 possible things we can automate, if not more. How do we distinguish which is a priority, which is not? How does that process work?
So, and then again, I think it's important to have a committee there that can throw a bunch of ideas at the wall. And there's nothing wrong with having these big sessions and saying, okay, let's just have representatives from each business line, each group, back office, middle office, front office, have them throw a bunch of ideas at the wall and say, here are things that I do, and I would love to not do this anymore. Um, and that's a good technology exercise in general to have every now and then. And that has to go through a committee of dedicated individuals that have some IT representation and RPA awareness to prioritize, right? And to say, okay, well, some of these processes, let's look at the time being consumed, right, to perform this process. Is this 1 hour per quarter? So four hours a year. Is this worth a project, an engagement, a tutorial, a hand-holding that would force us to build an automation using RPA or any other technology that might take 30 hours to build and might require some maintenance. And sometimes it's going to break and it might need to iterate and there are going to be upgrades and things like that. Or is this, 4 times a year, right? Just quantitatively doesn't make sense. Look at the qualitative aspect as well, right? It's not always just quantitative. It's not just dollars and cents. Sometimes you have to look at, like I was saying before, job satisfaction, turnover, look at risk, right? Are you reducing risk? And just like any other technology project, these are questions we ask as technology professionals. Are you reducing risk by taking this on? Maybe your ROI is negative, but the risk reduction or abiding by some compliance rules or regulation rules or adding an audit trail, maybe that outweighs the negative ROI, and now you could consider it an actual investment. So there are a couple of different ways to look at it. Not every process is also going to be right for RPA. If it's low volume, if there's a high amount of decision making. I can't speak to what the future holds with ML and AI incorporated with RPA, but at least right now, if there are processes that seem like they're ripe for automation, they're very repetitive, but there's a high degree of decision making. So, you're collecting some spreadsheet, you're inputting data into a back office system, you're pulling a report, you're formatting an Excel. But now, for example, you need to review codings in that report, your industry, some other bucket. You need to run it by somebody. They need to have a meeting. They need to look into some of the investment thesis to understand how they want to position this deal. Then they would give you an answer. That right there is going to fall apart pretty quickly with RPA unless you can define very clear rules and workflows. There's nothing wrong with a person being in the loop. But you don't want to be in a situation where the bot has to stop and now there's like 10 different individuals that have to get involved and a lot of decisions that have to be made. It's just a pointless automation. Um, so there are a couple of different aspects to look at when you're considering automating, just like when you're considering building an application from the ground up.
You see, and and I like that, right? So let's relate it to an application, because the one thing that I want to convey, and please, I want your opinion on this, right? Once you, let me ask you a question first. Once you put this RPA process for a particular task into production, now it's being used, would
Yeah.
you say that's part of your application list now? It's part of your stack in a sense. Would you agree with that?
100%. So there are kind of two ways to approach RPA development. There's the IT led enterprise wide RPA processes, and those are ones that tend to be a little more tech heavy, might have some actual back end integrations in it, might be a little bigger and take quite some time to build, and could be deployed across a broader audience. And then there's what a lot of firms call citizen led development, which is what I was alluding to earlier, where you give a tool like UiPath to empowered end users, power users on the business side. You provide a center of excellence, you provide some guidance and best practices and support, but they actually build their own processes using low code. So one is a little high code, requires some engineering talent. The other one is low code. End users can do these automations themselves. Those are typically not going to be enterprise. They're going to serve that individual on their desktop. So the either initiative, you do need to own them. You do need it to roll up to a technology manager and a technology organization. Um, the enterprise IT led development efforts, those are obviously going to be treated more like an actual application that the tech team is fully responsible for. The citizen led ones, the tech team generally would not be responsible for them, but we do have to provide a platform that's up and running. We have to provide some monitoring, and we do have to provide support, because when something breaks, even though the technology team didn't necessarily build it, the technology team has a responsibility to ensure that technology processes and platforms don't just fall apart and impact the business. So it is important to have an RPA umbrella, whether that's a standalone team, like I've run in the past, or it's part of another team that maybe does some other things. It is important to have technology oversight into RPA automations.
So, whether it's IT led or a citizen RPA project, as you put it, right? That change management aspect. Let's just talk about the citizen one, right? All right, it's been working. There is some new documents that came out, right? They have different fields, so we have to update it, right? Is there some sort of change management process with that, or somebody just going to their desk, updated it, and then putting on, like, how does that work?
So yes, there is a change management process. Uh, from the IT-led initiatives, there's going to be a heavier change management process in the sense that it's truly run as a traditional application. There has to be testing involved. The technology team is responsible for carefully rolling it out and ensuring you're not breaking anything that's relying on that automation. Um, so you would need to treat it like an application. You have some upstream provider that's sending a file that suddenly changed. Or, what happens sometimes is if you're latching onto web-based platforms as part of your automation, suddenly that platform you have no control over, they upgraded their interface. So now the fields that you're expecting to input into are maybe no longer there. They're in a different location. They're named completely differently, or it's just revamped completely, and now you can't access the UI anymore. So in that scenario, it would absolutely be like any other. Preferably you stay in touch with that vendor and you have a heads up that this is coming, and you incorporate it into your pipeline. Sometimes you can't. So it would be an application project using traditional change management in that case. The citizen-led one is a little bit different. There's a couple ways to approach it. Typically, like I was saying before, the power users on the business side are responsible for that automation. In most cases, that automation would not impact a broad audience outside of their PC. So it can be a little looser in the sense that it's not going to be an organizational wide impact, right? But having said that, the tech team should have some oversight, work with that individual, provide some level of testing, because that's not something that comes naturally outside of an IT organization. Provide some level of oversight, best practices. Hey, okay, we got this new format. Um, Let us know if you need help. Obviously, that person should be empowered to make the changes they need to make. Help them test it, and then help them deploy it and make sure that it's up and running. So it's really, that one is a little bit, touch and go, and every organization might handle that a little bit differently. But certainly the IT-led automations, in my mind, have to be run like any other uh, application development project.
That makes sense, right? So, and that's what I want to touch upon. So I'm happy you elaborated on that. Um, Looking at organizations, you might look at a smaller fund that definitely has all of these back office overhead. How do you but they might not be like total new age tech friendly, might be scared of implementing new things. I don't want additional, because one of the fears at times in just working in the industry, depending on the size of your organization, is, what, if we put this new technology in, that we need to hire some wizard to support it, and I don't
Mhm.
want to get into all that. Things are working out perfect the way it is. I don't want to shake the boat. How do you convince them, or or I don't know if the right word is sell them on the RPA, on leveraging RPA? How's that conversation work?
So I don't think, as a consultant, as an outside organization, right, you're going to sell them, and I don't think an IT group is necessarily going to sell them. I think it is important to educate, to let executive leadership know, hey, this is something some of your peers are doing. Speak to some outside consulting services to just get a lay of the land and say, okay, what are they doing? What are our peers doing? Let's see a demo. What is this technology? What can it do in our industry? What are some examples? Um, it really does have to come from the top. It's not something that a tech organization is going to come in and say, "Hey, there's this cool new thing. It's called robotics." It sounds sort of, is this a hammer looking for a nail? Is this something that the tech team's just excited to build a skill around it? But it's not necessarily, what are we going to do here? Um, so I think it's more about, it starts with educating executive leadership on, hey, we noticed there are some tasks and processes here that are pretty ripe for this kind of this paradigm of technology that might be able to help. Get the vendors involved. Look at a couple of vendors. There are a couple of huge players out there. Um, Start to see what he can do. Set up a proof of concept and say, hey, let's take a heavy repetitive back office process where a lot of these opportunities exist. Build a proof of concept at a low cost, or sometimes even no cost. See how it works. Start small. Um, Very kind of targeted, build a little bit of success and excitement from there, educate people, and move on. It's a technology that has a funny name, and it has funny connotations. So, what you don't want to do as an IT organization is just start throwing out sort of the latest and greatest, and just tell people this is what they need to do. You saw the same thing with the Gen AI revolution, right, over the last couple of years. It's really, I've spoken to Microsoft, PwC, McKinsey, Deloitte, and all every financial services firm is at least exploring, if not much more than that, what it can do and how it can generate alpha or reduce risk or generate efficiency with Gen AI technologies. They just don't know exactly how to leverage it. But what I could tell you is it almost never came from IT. It was almost never, an engineer going up to a COO and saying, hey, we should do some Gen AI. It's pretty cool. Here's where I think it could help. Um, it starts with just an education effort and say, we should be aware of this. Let's talk to a McKinsey. Let's talk to a large partner. Let's see what peers are doing in the industry. Let's collect some information. Speak to a couple of consultants. Let's speak to a couple of vendors. And once you educate yourself a little bit on it, the next obvious step is let's do a limited proof of concept and see what this can do. And that's what I've seen happen. And sometimes companies are ready for it. Other times there's an education effort, but maybe they decide that, well, we don't necessarily have the processes just yet that are ripe for this. Maybe this is just not a focus or a priority. We have other problems that are maybe lower hanging fruit. So really, it's going to depend on the organization, the needs of the organization, and just where are they at in their business growth life cycle.
Yeah, perfect. I like that. It's like, and that's the main thing, same concept with security or anything that you want to put a massive change on, whether you want to
Yeah.
add it to your software development lifecycle in the form of DevSecOps. It all starts with education. So,
Right.
watch RPA be the same, and then
Right.
delivering that proof of concept, like you said, or some sort of minimal viable product. Not
Yeah.
perfect. Makes sense. Um, I know we touched on the AI partnership. Can we, and that's like we see the, you know, having RPA mixed with API, not a competitor per se, but leveraging as partner technologies. Can we talk about the future of RPA? I mean, AI obviously has a lot to do with it. What, how do you see it evolving over the next 5 years?
Yeah, AI, I think, is going to be the biggest game changer for RPA. Like I was touching on before, that I can see uh, I can see the sort of front end being Gen AI applications, and the back end would hook into these RPA processes to actually take action and get things done. So, from a client facing perspective, whether it's fintech or some retail business, or maybe it's an investment portal, investor portal in the asset management space, interacting with outside parties through Gen AI, right? It can make sense of what action needs to be taken, what is being requested, and what the appropriate response is, and then generate um, actions based on that synthesis, and then pass that along to a bot that can act like a human being and take action. So Gen AI is good at just synthesizing human conversation, understanding what the action items might be, understanding the takeaways, right, summarizing the ideas, and generating responses. But then you need something to actually take action, and that's going to be the RPA side of it. It's kind of like, if you look at a Tesla, right? Super high tech piece of hardware and software. You have the cameras looking all around you and absorbing your environment and understanding, a bicyclist or a dog walker or a human being or a car or a tree or a garbage can, something like that. That's the sort of front facing part of the technology, but then it has to actually take physical mechanical action, right? And translating that to a set of actions. Could be braking, it could be accelerating, it could be turning, it could be avoiding, it could be whatever. um, so it's kind of the same situation with AI and RPA, and just that synergy. It's AI making sense of the world and figuring out what to do next, and even parsing unstructured data. That's a huge part of it that's already happening. um, and then you have your RPA processes stitching together activities and applications into a process that a human being might need to take after a conversation with somebody. So you bring those two technologies together, and it's honestly, it can automate a lot of things that you would have otherwise had to increase headcount for as your business grows. And just to touch on, the kind of, well, we're not talking about the obvious here, that I've heard many times in the context of RPA, is that there is this kind of funny connotation and fear of, like, well, is this a technology that's going to replace human beings, right? I know anytime there's some new technical advancement out there, automation, there's always this fear of, like, well, is it going to eliminate jobs? Is it going to take away, things that we're doing? And my answer to that is always that the economy and the businesses evolve to absorb these type of innovations to become toolkits that are absolutely indispensable, and allow the human beings, right, the knowledge workers, to elevate and grow and move on to higher value tasks, right? It's like, you go back to, like, the invention of the automobile. Yes, it eliminated the horse and carriage industry and all the services that provided that facilitated the horse industry, but it created a whole new industry of mechanical parts and, you know auto shops and dealerships, and, right, everything revolving around cars, right? It's just kind of transformed the way people did their jobs. And I think we're going to see the same thing with RPA and with AI. Um, Companies that are ignoring automation technologies and ignoring AI technologies are not going to be able to compete and crunch the large volumes of information that's out there, and they're going to have to add large amounts of human capital, where their peers will not, and the costs will not be there. So I think that uh, things are going to evolve in tandem with these technologies, and they're just going to become toolkits. RPA became a toolkit. I have not seen a single job get eliminated from the introduction of RPA, but I've seen growth that was facilitated by RPA that avoided a linear headcount growth that wouldn't be sustainable.
The interesting debate, because I mean, you look at it from one aspect, you haven't seen jobs get eliminated, but you've seen headcount not increase. So one
That's
can
right.
say, without that particular technology, they would have hired more people, but now they're not. So
So
it's
my
one.
so my yeah, so my counterpoint to that is that it creates a lower barrier to entry. These technologies create a lower barrier to entry to new companies coming into the marketplace. That now, instead of saying, "Well, this is a very expensive proposition. We need 40 people to launch this fund," um, you might have 40 new funds that need one person, right? And I'm exaggerating, but I think it creates a healthy growing marketplace and healthy competition and lowers the barrier to entry because these tools are available. I mean, you could equate that to the rise of the hedge fund in a box, right? And the servicers that are out there, right? The fund administrators, right? Before these firms existed, and with the just the magnitude of services that they offer, launching a new hedge fund was a pretty huge ordeal. You needed the right talent in like every vertical, every area to make sure that you can operate. Now you can literally have one person with some good investment ideas who can just outsource everything. Um, and they could, buy tools off the shelf on their credit card and get a CRM and get a general ledger and, outsource everything. So it's kind of the same idea. I think that it creates a tool. It limits waste within a firm, and it evolves people's skills and jobs and responsibilities.
Listen, I'm a technologist at heart. I think we recently found out that we both attended the same high school at different times,
Yep.
and it's a specialized high school. Shout out to Brooklyn,
Technology high school. Yep.
basic computer science. Look, I'm all for you have to evolve. If you don't evolve,
Yeah,
then you're
absolutely.
much done for in this industry. But I was just trying to pose that counter argument because I think it's a legitimate concern from some people, but
Yeah.
a- I've seen a lot of people who refuse to evolve,
Right.
and then
That's not an answer. Yeah.
that's not it
Never an
is
answer.
for an answer, especially the way the world is going right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Everything is just happening faster in terms of technology, in terms of things that are being automated, in terms of just the rise of these technologies. I mean, I think what my advisor, my grad advisor, will probably get on me like, it's like, what is the law? It's like it escapes me. It's a new law, but it's a law in which these things are going to be built faster and faster over time. Like,
Yeah, I guess Moore's law, right? The computational power one. Yeah, yeah, the compounding exponential
yeah,
growth. Agree 100%, especially and with Gen AI, like no one really knows exactly where that's going, but I can imagine just it creating completely new industries. And the thing is, if companies refuse to leverage these technologies, pretty soon they're going to find themselves unable to compete in a landscape where there's just such huge volumes of data being generated that you can't possibly make sense of it and make timely decisions from it while your peers are going to be using this technology to action on it very quickly. So I feel like there's just no, it's a capitalist economy, right? It's survival of the fittest. The tools are being put out there, there's a marketplace for them, and the companies that embrace change are going to rise to the top.
Gary, I totally enjoyed this conversation. It's been a while since I played with RPO. I wasn't playing at the time, I was actually working with it. So it was really good to talk about it with someone who's been doing it since then and beyond and currently doing it. Because it made me think about like the past experience I've had with it, and you kind of spark something because with everything I start looking at security implications, like
Yeah.
especially if you look at the IT-led RPA processes, even the citizen-led one, right? For me, it's what data is it touching? How is that data protected? What third-party systems is it dependent on? How often are we monitoring the necessary security vulnerabilities or upgrades
Mhm.
needed for third-party software? So, as we were talking, that all that was going through my mind, in which at the time I was working with RP. I wasn't heavily involved with security, so I wasn't thinking about it. But it's more so looking at it from the role of getting it to production, and
Yeah.
now it's a different mind state. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Last question, just for organizations who are on the fence, who like some practical advice, right now, just to say, you're coming in, what's some practical advice you can give them, as a closing question?
Yeah, I think what we touched on earlier, if there's hesitancy or if you're just looking to explore, speak to some consultants out there, look at what your peers are doing, um, speak to a couple of vendors, gain some knowledge. Consultants like myself are happy to just share knowledge and talk and talk about the art of the possible. And start small. Get somebody excited from the business. Start there. Start with a group that is just inundated with manual, repetitive tasks. And maybe you'll find throughout that conversation that RPA is not the answer, or maybe you find that it will be, or maybe it's part of the answer. But start having those conversations, start speaking to some professional services providers who have seen peers in the industry and can talk to you about what they're doing. Get some demos going to spark some interest and educate yourself. And start small. Make a small investment. Start with a proof of concept. Start a subset of a process. Get someone engaged. Elect someone to actually be responsible for this proof of concept. You don't want it to just kind of be there for whoever wants to try it can try it. Those things never work out. Assign some accountability, and see how it can impact your organization.
We're gonna take a brief moment from our sponsor, and then we're gonna get back with some closing remarks on Gary and how you can find him.
Sounds good.
We will take a brief moment. Sponsor.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
Just like that, we are back. Gary, really appreciate you coming on the show today. One of our traditions for all our guests is that we leave the stage and give you an opportunity to talk about your company, how people can find you, and so forth. So on that note, we're doing that right now.
Appreciate it, Namdi. Thanks for everything. It was a pleasure. Thanks everybody for tuning in. So like Namdi said in the intro, my name is Gary Dmitriev. I run a company called CrestPoint Strategic Advisors, focusing on empowering the alternative investment space. My mission is to provide strategic services in the areas of automation, reporting and analytics, and bespoke back, middle, and front office technologies in the finance space. You could find me at www.crestpointadvisors.com or LinkedIn, or reach out to me anytime at gary@crestpointadvisors.com. Thank you.
Now, sounds good. What I wanted to do was just add that add your URL. Give me a second. I was gonna add your URL to the show notes so people can find it. You said CrestPoint's Advisors?
CrestPoint, yeah, CrestPointadvisors.com.
All right, cool. Let me go to that URL and then add it to the show so people can have it. All right, excellent. Got it. 1 second. Do that right now. Put it in the comments.
Yep.
There we go.
Got it.
So guys, as part of the show now, Gary, really thank you for coming on. We'll definitely have you on. You're a friend of the show. So different topics arise in the news regarding this. We'll bring you on, get your expert advice on it, and just help the audience learn more about these things that arise, and we'll take it from there. On that note, I want to thank everyone for joining Tech Behind FinTech every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a slew of guests from now throughout the end of the year. So you want to join. We recently went to the Open Source Financial Forum Conference hosted by Finos. So we've been posting some videos for some interviews we had there. The end of the month, we're going to be at Money 2020 in Vegas. We'll do some TVF on the go videos. That's what we're calling this. This is our podcast, our quote unquote street interviews, our TVF on the go interviews. So you'll get some insight from some leaders in the financial space and technology space. So look out for that. We will be launching our new web platform in the next week, well, really next 2 weeks before Money 2020. There you'll get all FinTech news, FinTech directories, people on the show. We'll have some technologists of the week, business guy of the week, and so forth. So you definitely want to look out for techbehindfintech.com with our new web platform. So those are the updates, and you'll drop your email. You can be part of our newsletter, so you won't miss a beat on fintech and financial news. So those are the things that's happening on our side. We want to thank you for joining today's show, whether you watch the show live, whether you watch it tomorrow or next year. I want to thank you in advance. We appreciate the DMs, the questions, and so forth. And on that note, I bid all a happy weekend. Make the best of it. Make it spectacular. Thank you for your time, and we are out. Gary, once again, thank you very much, and you take care.
Pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Andy.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.